It's 3:47 a.m. in a warehouse in Huntington Park. A man in a hoodie is dragging the rear bumper of a Dodge Charger Hellcat across a concrete floor toward a pile of identical bumpers in the corner. He's been at this car for 40 minutes. The Hellcat rolled into the warehouse on a flatbed at 3:09. The hood's already gone, the headlights are gone. The supercharged 6.2's sitting on a hydraulic stand in the next bay, wrapped in plastic, ready for shipping. There are 74 other cars in this warehouse in some stage of being taken apart. Most of them are Hellcats. The owner of this one filed a police report at 8 a.m. yesterday. The car's already been pieces for 11 hours. This is how Dodge built the most stolen car in America, and why every fix made it worse. The Charger Hellcat gets stolen 60 times more often than the average car on American roads. The next car on the most stolen list, the regular Charger with the Hemi V8, comes in at 20 times the average. There's the Hellcat, then everything else, and the gap's laughable. $25 thefts per 1,000 Hellcats, 2 thefts per 1,000 Infiniti Q60s, the most stolen car of the previous era. The Hellcat invented a category nobody had to track before. The first layer of why these cars don't come back is the way thieves get into them. The Hellcat's security architecture has a hole in it the car's own engineering team built in for reasons that made perfect sense in 2014 and have aged into a disaster. When you walk up to a Hellcat with the key fob in your pocket, the car detects a low-frequency signal and unlocks. The button on the dashboard recognizes the same signal and lets the engine start. That's the system working as designed. The problem's the diagnostic port behind it. Every modern car has an OBD port, the diagnostic socket a mechanic plugs into when something throws a check engine light. On post-2018 Hellcats, that port runs through a security gateway. A laptop plugged into the OBD can read codes, but it can't program a new key fob to the car. Dodge engineered that gateway specifically to make key cloning attacks impossible through the front door. What they didn't lock down was the back door. Behind the glove box and behind the headlight assembly, the Hellcat has what's called a star connector, a hub where multiple CAN bus lines meet. Plug a handheld programmer into that hub, and you bypass the security gateway entirely. The car treats the programmer like a friendly factory tool. It hands over the keys. The whole exploit takes about 30 seconds once the connector's exposed. Pull the headlight, find the splice, plug in, generate a new fob, walk to the door, push the button, read that math again. 30 seconds, no glass broken, no alarm, no struggle. The car drives away with what the computer believes is a perfectly legitimate key. There are forums, encrypted chat groups, and preloaded handheld programmers shipped from overseas with model-specific firmware. The exploit's not a secret, it's a product category. So that explains how thieves get in. It doesn't explain why they keep coming back for these specific cars when there are easier targets on every block. The answer's in what happens to the Hellcat in the 4 hours after it leaves the driveway. A Hellcat with a clean title and 12,000 miles was selling for around $90,000 new. That whole car has a problem. It has a vehicle identification number stamped into the dashboard, etched into the windshield, plated on the engine block, and registered with the state. Drive it across state lines and any plate reader cop running the database knows where it came from in under 3 seconds. As a whole vehicle, the Hellcat's a flag waving from a long pole. Now break it apart. The 6.2-liter supercharged Hemi, the one that makes 707 horsepower, has a Mopar crate engine MSRP of about $20,000. Used Hellcat engines on the open market run between $8,000 and $18,000 depending on mileage. The 8-speed automatic goes for $5,000 to $7,000. The supercharger by itself can pull $4,000 to $5,000. Then come the body panels, Hellcat-specific fenders, Hoods, bumpers, and wide-body flares only fit Hellcats. A clean hood with the functional scoop sells on enthusiast forums for $1,500 to $2,500. The wide-body flares, another $1,500. The seats with the Hellcat logos, the carbon trim, the wheels, the brakes, the steering wheel. Stack it all up and a single $90,000 car becomes $40,000 to $60,000 in cash, paid in pieces, with each piece traceable to nothing. That's the math. A whole car has a VIN. A pile of parts doesn't. The parts move on Facebook Marketplace, on Craigslist, on niche forums, on private Telegram channels, and into the hands of buyers who 90% of the time have no idea what they're buying.
Hey, is the Atlanta Police search warrant? Stop what you're doing. Atlanta Police search warrant! Stop what you're doing. Stop what you're doing!
In March of 2025, the Fresno Police Department's career criminal auto theft team raided 2 warehouses, one in Fresno, one in Huntington Park, and found over 75 stolen vehicles in some stage of being taken apart, with a combined value north of $3 million. Most of them were Hellcats and Trackhawks. 7 arrests, 110 felony counts, 10 firearms recovered alongside the parts. That bust got the headlines. The pattern underneath them's worse. In May 2024, San Antonio investigators raided a property off Basse Road and arrested a man the case file called Hellcat Mike. His crew was stealing Hellcats, pulling the drivetrains, and reinstalling them into base Stellantis vehicles, then selling those vehicles on Facebook Marketplace for roughly half what a real Hellcat would cost. The cars even had a calling card, a Hellcat decal across the rear door and C-pillar. When investigators raided the shop, they pulled over a Chrysler 300, leaving the property. The 300 sticker said 300. The onboard computer said it was a $124,000 Charger Hellcat that had been reported stolen months earlier. On paper, that car was 2 cars. Physically, it was 1. The supercharged 6.2 that used to live under some owner's hood was now living under a Chrysler 300's hood, sold to a buyer in San Antonio who thought he'd found a deal on Facebook. In June 2025, Miami police raided a father and son operation and recovered $500,000 in stolen Hellcat and Trackhawk components, bumpers, fenders, an entire stolen Durango Hellcat sitting in the backyard. The father told investigators he'd bought the SUV for $5,000 and the seller had conveniently disappeared. The same vehicle had retailed for $110,000. In October 2025, a stolen Hellcat Red-Eye out of Hendersonville, Tennessee, led police on a chain that crossed 3 states, Hopkinsville, Kentucky, then Paint Rock, Alabama. Investigators found a chop shop, a VIN swap operation, an illegal marijuana farm, and stolen vehicles from 3 other states, all on the same property. One Hellcat solved 8 separate theft cases. Every operation police shut down had been running for months or years before anyone noticed. For every one that gets closed, 3 more take its place. The economics are too good and the supplies too constant. The recovery numbers tell the story by themselves. When a regular stolen car comes back, it usually comes back complete, maybe missing a stereo, maybe with some interior damage, drivable, repairable. When a stolen Hellcat comes back, what comes back's a shell. Investigators talk about Hellcat recoveries in pieces because that's what they get: a fender in one state, a transmission in another, a VIN tag pressure washed clean and welded onto a salvage charger that someone bought at a Memphis insurance auction for $4,200. The car still exists in the database. Physically, the car the database describes ceased to exist within hours of being taken. That's the gap nobody puts in the official statistics. There's no category on the recovery report for found, but not really. So the second layer's this: the cars don't come back because the cars stop being cars. There's a third layer underneath that, and it breaks every assumption about what a stolen car economy is supposed to look like. The third layer is about what happened when Dodge actually tried to fix this, because they tried, repeatedly, and every fix made the wrong problem worse. The first fix landed in late 2021 and got a name that sounds reassuring: Key Programming Lockdown. Dodge sent letters to owners offering a free dealer software update that would permanently lock the RF hub module, the radio frequency component that talks to key fobs, so thieves couldn't program new keys through the star connector or the OBD port. The fix worked, at least for that specific attack. Owners were thrilled, briefly. Then they read the letter again. The lockdown's permanent. Once it's installed, the RF hub can't be updated again, ever. If the owner loses both key fobs in the future, drops them in a lake, leaves them in a rental car in another country, has a fire in the kitchen, the dealership can't program a replacement. The whole module has to be replaced first. The module lists for around $160. New fobs run another $200 each. Programming labor's extra. So the fix to the theft problem was accept a permanent restriction on your own car. Agree that you can never lose your keys or stay vulnerable. Plenty of owners took the lockdown, plenty refused it. The ones who refused stayed in the same theft funnel they were in before. The second fix came alongside the first and got a different name: Enhanced Security Valet Mode. The idea was straightforward. A stolen Hellcat could be limited to 3 miles per hour with a 4-digit PIN, so even if a thief got into the car and started it, they couldn't drive it out of the driveway. Owners got the update. The update started throwing error codes in cold weather. Owners reported the system disengaging engine power at random. Some had to engage and disengage the feature with the engine off as a workaround just to keep their cars drivable. Within months, Dodge pulled Enhanced Security Valet Mode entirely. If you'd already had it installed, the recommendation was to take the car back to the dealer and have the previous software flash back on. The anti-theft fix got recalled, and owners had to drive back to the dealership to have their security feature removed. The third fix isn't really a fix, it's a discontinuation. In 2023 and 2024, Dodge began ending the gas-powered Charger and Challenger production runs, replacing the entire muscle car lineup with the electric Charger Daytona. The theory inside Stellantis was simple: electric cars get stolen far less than gas cars. Killing the Hellcat would, eventually, kill the Hellcat theft problem. There's just one issue with that theory. Killing a Hellcat doesn't kill the parts demand for the existing Hellcats already on the road. It increases it. The supply of new Hellcat engines stops. The supply of stolen Hellcat engines doesn't. The conventional wisdom on every automotive forum said the same thing the day Dodge announced the end. Discontinuation would push values up. Hellcats would appreciate, the supply would freeze, demand would stay high, and clean low-mile cars would start commanding premiums within a year. Buyers paid $90,000 for cars they planned to garage and flip in 2025. That's not what happened. By late 2025, last call Hellcats with under 1,000 miles were selling for $60,000. Some last call Challengers were going for less than original MSRP. New 2023 Hellcats were still sitting on dealer lots in November 2025, marked down $9,000 to $11,000 below sticker 2 years after production ended. The collector premium evaporated before it ever materialized. The reason's brutal in its simplicity. Dodge made over 100,000 Hellcat-powered cars across all variants in 9 years. They weren't rare. They were everywhere. The standard Hellcats became another high-mileage performance car, competing against every other discontinued V8 on the used market. But the same cars that lost value as whole vehicles kept gaining value as parts. while a clean used Hellcat dropped from 90,000 to 55,000 between 2023 and 2025. The supercharged 6.2-liter engine held steady at around 15,000 to 20,000 used. The transmission held its price, the body panels held their price. Every piece of the car appreciated relative to the car itself. Look at that math one more time. The whole Hellcat was worth less every year. The pieces of the Hellcat were worth more every year. A car depreciating faster than it can be insured, sitting on top of a parts catalog appreciating in real time. The thieves figured this out before the collectors did. They were never stealing Hellcats for resale as Hellcats. They were stealing them for the engine, the transmission, the supercharger, and the panels that fit no other car. The whole car market collapsed because too many existed. The parts market stayed strong because every other Hellcat owner needed those exact components when something broke. So the situation in 2026 is this: there are roughly 100,000 Hellcat-powered cars on American roads. They depreciate faster than almost any used performance car. They cost $5,000 to $8,000 a year to insure if you can find a company that'll write the policy at all. They're being stolen at 60 times the rate of a normal car. And the parts they're being stripped for are worth more than the cars they're being stripped from. The owner who paid $90,000 in 2022 watches the market value drop to $55,000 by 2025. Then the car gets stolen, and the owner's insurance pays out the depreciated value, not the purchase price. Then the car gets stripped, and the parts go for $50,000 in pieces. The thief makes more money than the owner lost. The system pays out, the supply gets renewed, and the next one in line gets hit. The Hellcat's the cleanest version of this pattern, but the same engineering's playing out across half the cars on American roads. The CAN bus attack that opens a Hellcat opens BMWs, Range Rovers, Toyotas, Lexuses. The same parts economy's been running for years on stolen Trackhawks, on stolen Corvettes, on stolen Ford Super Duties. The Hellcat just got there first because the parts economics rewarded the math earliest. Dodge built a flagship. The market turned it into a parts catalog. Every fix Dodge has shipped, the RF hub lockout, the recalled valet mode, the discontinuation itself, addressed the wrong problem. The problem was never the lock. The problem was the math. The car's gone before it ever moves. The thieves know this. The insurance companies know this. The owner's the last to find out. So who's actually responsible here? Is it Dodge for engineering a security architecture with a hole the size of a star connector? Is it the dealers for not applying the lockout TSB on every car they touch? Is it the owners for not knowing the lockout exists? Or is it the simple fact that any car valuable enough to be worth stealing in pieces will eventually be stolen in pieces, no matter what the manufacturer ships?